everyone, the A series is Samsung's most popular lineup and it has the largest number of phones in it. The A72 is the family's highest end model, at least so far. It has a bigger battery and a bigger screen than the Galaxy A52, along with an extra 3x zoom cam. So is it worth the price premium? I'm Angie for GSM Marina, and this is our review of the Galaxy A72. The A72 has a similar design to the A52. It comes in white, black, violet, and blue, like our unit. We like Samsung's current pastel color trend and the way that the camera island is smoothed out and blended with the back panel. It all looks rather cohesive. In the hand, it feels smooth, rubbery, and also slightly silky. This is a phone that we recommend trying out in person since we saw varied reactions to it in our office. The back and frame are actually made of plastic, but it doesn't feel cheap. The buttons are nice and clicky too. The A72 is both larger and heavier than the previous generation, but that's in part due to a larger battery. As a whole, it's comfortable to use. We also appreciate the IP67 dust and water protections, which isn't always a given on phones in this price range. On the front, there's a small centered hole punch. The bezels aren't the thinnest we've ever seen, but they're alright for the class. You'll also find an optical under-display fingerprint reader. We actually prefer these to the ultrasonic module on Samsung's flagships. As a whole, this one was very consistent, though a touch sluggish by today's standards. The 6.7-inch Super AMOLED panel has a Full HD resolution and a 90Hz refresh rate. It's a larger display than on the A52, which might be one of the reasons to consider this phone over its sibling. The screen is brighter than last year. With Max Auto, it topped out at 825 nits on our tests, so it should be very usable outdoors. It has two color profiles available, vivid and natural. Greens were a little bit off no matter what we tried, though the white point itself was pretty much perfect. Still, the vivid mode looks great. Unfortunately, there's no HDR video support here, but at least there's Widevine L1 support, so you're good for streaming HD content. The 90Hz refresh rate is what is considered to be an entry-level high refresh rate these days. Still, the extra smoothness is obvious when scrolling. There's no adaptive refresh rate handling, and you'll only find the option of using it in either 60Hz or the 90Hz mode. Most apps actually take advantage of the higher refresh rate. This phone, however, is not smart enough to drop the refresh rate to save on battery life when you're playing a video. So if you're planning on a long Netflix session, better switch manually to 60Hz to save on battery. You can also get 90Hz on games that are simple and light, though the phone might struggle to do that with heavier titles. The A72 has expandable storage thanks to a hybrid card tray, and it comes with either 128 or 256 GB of base storage. On the bottom of the phone, you'll find a 3.5mm headphone jack and a bottom-firing speaker. It's a stereo speaker setup, which should just be industry standard at this point. It uses the earpiece as a second channel, and the A72 had a good loudness score in our tests. The phone has a good set of audio options too. Dolby Atmos allows you to choose optimized profiles for movies, music, and voice, along with an automatic option that switches depending on the situation. The Galaxy A72 has a 5000 mAh battery, and it got a very good endurance score of 117 hours on our tests, with web tests set at 90Hz and video tests set at 60Hz. With the 60Hz mode, it got as much as 121 hours. As for charging, the 25-watt charger got the phone from 0 to 54% in half an hour, and a full charge took an hour and 15 minutes. This is a pretty similar result to other Galaxy devices like the S21 family and the Note 20 phones. The A72 sports a Snapdragon 720G and either 6 or 8 gigs of RAM. The chipset choice is a bit weaker than it should be given the phone's price range. It makes you want to take a look at competitors like the Poco F3, the OnePlus Nord, or even the Galaxy M51. All the same, it holds its own for most day-to-day tasks, like gaming and 4K video capture on both the ultra-wide and main cameras. It's good enough for what it is, but we still wish Samsung had gone for something more powerful. You should know that Samsung is committed to delivering 3 major OS updates and 4 years of security patches, so the phone should have good longevity. At the moment, the A72 sports Android 11 with One UI 3.1 on top, though there aren't a lot of differences between One UI 3.0 and 2.5. The default lock screen shortcuts are now monochrome, and the lock screen has a well-being widget, so you can see how much time you spend on your phone. Personally, I'm wary of seeing that information constantly, but I digress. The UI also has more simplified always-on display settings in comparison to before, though there are no shortage of actual options. When you pull down the notification shade, it now covers the entire screen underneath. From there, you can edit quick toggles directly via the plus button instead of hunting through the options in the menu. There are more refined multimedia controls too, found right below the quick toggles. The notification history is accessible from the settings menu, just in case you dismiss a notification too quickly and want to see what it's about. Thanks to Android 11, you'll have better permissions handling, and you'll find bubbles as an extension of the conversation feature. The settings menu has also had a design change. Recent searches are shown as bubbles instead of a list, and you can now search for settings by using hashtags, which saves you from hunting endlessly through the menu. Other than that, you'll find Samsung classic edge panels, Bixby, and the game launcher. Sadly, there's no Samsung DeX for the mid-range yet, though you can get some of the functionality from the Link to Windows feature. The Galaxy A72 has a quad camera setup. It has a 64-megapixel main camera with OIS, an 8-megapixel telephoto camera with OIS and a native 3x zoom, a 12-megapixel ultra-wide camera, and a 5-megapixel macro camera. During the day, shots are dependable but not spectacular. The dynamic range is wide for the class, and we like the lively colors. If you zoom in with the telecamera, you'll get good stills and good light conditions. There's little noise and there was plenty of detail. Colors are often cooler than on the main camera. You can zoom in further, and if you zoom in 10 times, you'll actually still have usable shots. There are some over-sharpening artifacts though, and you'll see more of them the further in you zoom. The ultra-wide camera captures solid stills for the class. The photos are nice. Colors here were also cooler than on the main camera and were actually closer to what the telecam captured. Software distortion correction worked well too, and as a whole it's worth using unless you're after that barrel distortion look in particular. Low-light photos are above average for the class. The reason perhaps is that the camera's scene optimizer would often trigger an auto night mode on any of the three cameras. So we got very good low-light photos out of the main cam. Noise is kept at bay better than on the A52, and the colors are quite good. The dynamic range is wider than most, and the highlight rendition was exemplary. Turning on the dedicated night mode doesn't improve anything. On the contrary, it takes a longer time to take a photo, and the images are cropped to 12 megapixels, so the field of view is not as wide. And while it does brighten up the shadows marginally, the highlights are clearly clipped in comparison to the auto mode. Overall, we would recommend that you stick to the auto mode for low-light shots. The zoom camera holds up well in low light too. Photos look better than cropping in, and you'll see good detail and sharpness. The auto night mode helps a lot here as well. Zoom in any further and the quality nosedives, especially if you shoot anything beyond 10 times zoom. But that's understandable. Finally, the ultra-wide produced very decent shots for its class. Thanks to the auto night mode, we captured some nice low-light images with decent detail, saturated colors, and a good dynamic range. Portraits are okay, but far from perfect. The subject separation and background blur are done very well, though we had issues with focus. Hardly any of the faces came out in focus, whereas non-human subjects looked tack sharp. Macro shots are impressive for the class. The focus plane is wide and forgiving, and shots came out nice and detailed. Selfies are taken with 32-megapixel camera in the punch hole. They have solid quality and have plenty of detail and not too much noise. Though there's no autofocus, the camera had a forgivingly wide focus plane. The A72 can shoot footage up to 4K at 30 FPS on all of its cameras, well, besides the macro one, of course. Footage taken with the main camera was balanced and had mature processing. There's plenty of detail and a wide enough dynamic range. We didn't see much noise and everything looked sharp. Footage with the ultrawide had a bit narrower dynamic range, but still looked quite good. Once again, the ultrawide had cooler colors than the main snapper. The telephoto had great detail at 4K. Dynamic range was good, so is the level of detail. Overall, great performance for a mid-range telephoto. Stabilization works on all three cameras at Full HD, though the main camera has OIS, so it has some stabilization already. Still, the Super Steady mode is a bit of a step up, though you'll have to decide if it's worth the extra crop of the field of view. The A72 is a unique phone in the packed mid-range. We like the display, the stereo speakers, the ingress protection, and the large battery. The cameras are versatile, and the promise of 3 major OS updates isn't one to ignore. It would have been nice to see a 120Hz refresh rate instead of 90, and we wish that the color consistency across all three cameras was better, although sometimes even more expensive phones struggle with this. Where the phone really falters in my mind is the chipset, and that's because it's a much weaker chipset than many competitors. Still, if you're after a mid-ranger with a high refresh rate screen, IP protection, a telecamera, and you're not a power user, then we definitely recommend this one. You won't be disappointed. Thank you for watching, everyone. Stay safe, and I'll see you guys next time.